Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. The book of Ruth is really beautiful and amazing. If you don't see what I am seeing, you may think just like a young woman followed and listened to an old woman, and eventually her fortune changed and started living happily ever after. That's what you think, but it's much more. The book of Ruth is full of profound spiritual lessons that are beautifully woven into into its narrative. What a beautiful character Ruth was. Let's see what made her secure a position in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. Chapter 1, it was a tragedy, and you see loyalty and faithfulness of a young woman called Ruth in her adversity. So now let's see. The book opens with Naomi's family experiencing hardship, famine, loss of her husband, and then the deaths of her two sons, leaving her with her Moabite daughters-in-law, um, Orpah and Ruth. Naomi decides to return to Bethlehem and urges both of them to stay in Moab, hoping they will have a better chance at a secure time, a secure future. Uh, Orpah eventually leaves, but Ruth makes a stunning declaration of loyalty. Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Ruth's commitment to Naomi, despite having every reason to turn back, uh, her commitment teaches us about faithfulness and loyalty. And her choice to cling to her mother in law, Naomi, and embrace God's people or Naomi's God, that reveals us the depth of her character, and it foreshadows how God honors steadfast faith. This chapter also challenges us to trust God's plans even when we can't see the road ahead, and it reminds us that God values our devotion and willingness to follow Him, even though uncertainty and hardship are there in front of us. Now, we see a bit romantic uh, uh, aspect of this book of Ruth. Ruth meeting Boaz, perfect God's provision in unexpected ways. So in Bethlehem, Ruth begins gleaning in the fields to provide for herself and Naomi. As it turns out, she's actually gleaning in the field of Boaz, a relative of Naomi's late husband, Elimelech. Boaz notices Ruth's hard work and kindness toward Naomi. He treats her generously, offering her protection and ensuring she has enough food. It's very kind of a Boaz, such a lovely character he is. And this highlights how God can guide us and provide for us even when we are unaware of His hand at work. Ruth chance encounter with Boaz is actually a divine setup. Boaz's kindness and generosity reflect God's character, being protective, compassionate, and willing to go out of his way to bless those who act with love and humility. So we learn that God often uses our small steps of faith, like Ruth's willingness to work in the fields, to open doors of provision and blessing. It's a reminder to trust that God sees our needs and is working to meet all of them, even in ways we don't anticipate, in the ways that we cannot see. And third chapter talks about Ruth's bold request, taking steps of faith. Naomi senses Naomi is really a good person who has that extra sense. No, she senses an opportunity for a secure future for Ruth and advises her to approach Boaz, essentially proposing that he act as her kinsman redeemer. Basically, he's a family protector who could marry her and restore Naomi's family line. Ruth takes a step of faith, humbly and boldly asking Boaz for protection by lying at his feet. Boaz agrees, but mentions a potential obstacle. There's a nearer kinsman, Redeemer, who has first rights. So Boaz promises to resolve the issue by morning. Here we learn about Ruth's approach to Boaz. It actually represents both humility and faith. She doesn't presume or manipulate, but comes with respect and vulnerability. That sense of vulnerability, such a beautiful character that we see. And her courage encourages us to trust in God enough to take bold steps when needed, while still being patient and respectful of God's timing. And his Boy's response also, it shows his integrity and importance of honoring both Israel and both social and family obligations. Together, their actions underscore that God honors the faith of those who act with a pure heart and integrity, humility. So now we get to see in the fourth chapter redemption and restoration. God's redeeming love. Boaz seeks out the closer kinsman's redeemer to fulfill the lawful process. And when the other relative declines, Boaz takes Ruth as his wife, redeeming Naomi's family line and the land also. Ruth and Boaz union is blessed with a son, Obed, who becomes part of the lineage leading to King David and ultimately to Jesus. Um, Naomi's life, once filled with sorrow, as we see in the first chapter, in the beginning, now it is renewed as she becomes a grandmother, holding the future of her family in her arms. So this final chapter celebrates God's power to redeem and restore. Ruth, a Moabite widow with no inheritance, becomes the great grandmother of King David, showing that God's blessings extend beyond race, nationality, or even past circumstances. Boaz's role as a kinsman redeemer prefigures Christ, who would become our redeemer, rescuing us from spiritual poverty and restoring us to a place of blessing and purpose in God's family. Naomi's story reminds us that no situation is beyond God's ability to redeem and restore. When we surrender to His will, He can transform our deepest sorrows into joy and purpose, often in the ways that have a lasting impact. It's not just for some bread and some curry as long as Naomi lived or Ruth lived, but it's much way beyond that we see that. Okay, overall spiritual lessons from Ruth: being faithful in uncertainty, as Ruth chose to say, "Your God is my God, your people are my people. Wherever you go, I will come." So that reminds us faithfulness is important, especially in the hard times, and it honors God. And also God's quiet provision, how Boaz generously provided, and that proposal of marriage and redemption and restoration, how Boaz's willingness to redeem Ruth and Naomi's family points to the ultimate redemption we find in Jesus Christ. Just as Boaz restored Ruth's place in the community, Jesus also restores us to a right relationship with God. God specializes in transforming brokenness into blessing and using our stories to accomplish His purposes. And now, another important thing I would like to conclude with: inclusiveness in God's kingdom. Ruth, being a foreigner, a Moabite, now becoming a part of Israel's story and eventually part of Jesus' lineage. God's kingdom welcomes everyone, showing that our backgrounds don't disqualify us from His plans. His sovereign God. Instead, faith and loyalty to Him make us part of His redemptive story. So it's a beautiful reminder of God's faithfulness, love, and His power at work in the lives of those who trust Him. Even in the midst of pain, and uncertainty, God's love is constant and He's always working toward a great purpose. God bless you.